I am sure you guys have been waiting for this. Today, I'm going to be breaking down my rest of season rankings tier by tier at every major fantasy position, going through my top 30 or so running backs, top 40 or so wide receivers, top 15 to 20 quarterbacks and tight ends to help you guys get a sense for what players are valued similarly, which guys are tiers up from other guys so that you can go out and make some informed trades in your fantasy football league. So I worked really hard on this one. Leave a like if you enjoyed. If you got some value from this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new around here and this is the first time you're checking us out. Now let's get into it. All right, so we're going to kick this thing off. We're going to go through my top 30 running backs, my top 40 wide receivers, top 15 to 20 quarterbacks and tight ends in that order. If you guys want to skip ahead at any point, of course, use the timestamps along the scroll bar in the description there. We're going to start it off with the elite RB1. So these are the guys that, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg in a redraft league to trade me, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, or Austin Eckler. Christian McCaffrey is untouchable when healthy, a little banged up right now, but nonetheless, he is going to be a very good option. Buy low on Bijan Robinson. He projects as one of the best late season breakout candidates, guys that could absolutely win people some leagues. So even though he's not producing at the highest level in the last couple games, I'm very confident that he is going to bounce back, no questions asked. And we broke that down a little bit more in earlier today's video in our week 7 trade targets. And then Austin Eckler here, now healthy. Usage was back up this past week, and he's got a nice schedule going forward. So all three of these guys, certified studs. The running back position is a little bit weaker this year, I'd say, than it's been in recent years, but these guys are the cream of the crop. So the RB1 tier, you guys can see Travis Etienne, Tony Pollard, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, and Kenneth Walker. All of these guys kind of have their merits. Some of them are, elite talents. Some of them have great workloads, et cetera, et cetera. Travis Etienne and Tony Pollard are both great backs with elite RB1 workloads, hence why they are my 4 and my 5. Pollard hasn't played quite as well as he's done in recent years, but we are seeing a big-time breakout from Travis Etienne, and I think both offenses could stand to improve down the stretch, and both offenses, if they have an easy schedule or if they run into some cupcake opponents, could really do some damage down the stretch as well. So Etienne and Pollard feel very confident if you guys have them anchoring your running back position. Jonathan Taylor is the guy that's kind of in this range that's still a projection. It definitely hurts not having Anthony Richardson anymore. It was announced today that he is done for the season. He is going to have shoulder surgery. But I will say he is still a buy low because we've seen the 2 ramp-up games so far when it comes to his workload. This week, he should be back to 70, 80% of the snaps. Zach Moss kind of being left in the dust at that point in time. Then we have Breece Hall, who has definitely taken a big step forward in recent weeks. Zach Wilson has been functional for this offense, and we saw Breece Hall post a season high in snap share, posting 68% of the snaps this past week, starting to secure some of the long down and distance and 2-minute drill work as well. He is a stable RB1 going forward. It's not the greatest offense in the world, but we are seeing some strides from Zach Wilson. And of course, Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are going to go a long way, and their schedule is a lot easier these next couple weeks. They played the hardest part of their schedule early on in the NFL season. So Breece Hall, a guy that is definitely on the rise for me in my rankings. Then we have Kenneth Walker closing out this tier, who has a great workload, and I would say it's only improving as well. He's posted a season high in snap share in back-to-back games. The game before the bye, he posted a 71% snap share, which was the best on the season so far. And then this past week, posted a 76% snap share. And as I said about Zach Charbonnet and Tank Bigsby this summer, people were fools to be discounting Kenneth Walker and Travis Etienne because of these 2 rookies. Because if you guys do, your research and you understand how NFL coaches think, they don't typically like rookies. And we see all of these rookie running backs take a long time to get acclimated. And that's usually when they're playing behind some dusty old veteran, let alone these 2 young ascending talents like Travis Etienne and Kenneth Walker. So I'm very glad to be on the right side of history with them. I have 15% Etienne in Best Ball Mania 4 and 12% Kenneth Walker, so I had a lot of exposure to those 2 guys. Then we get into the back-end RB1s tier. You guys can see all the names here: DeAndre Swift, Saquon Barkley, Raheem Mostert, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs. With all of these guys, again, they all kind of bring something different to the table. DeAndre Swift, in my opinion, has been managed perfectly by the Philadelphia Eagles coaching staff. This is exactly what you want from DeAndre Swift, hovering right around 15, 20 opportunities a game, a 60% snap share, because we know what happens when we want DeAndre Swift to get more work than that. He gets hurt, right? That's what happened in Detroit. And that's what we don't want to happen in Philadelphia. So I'm glad that they're limiting him 55, 60% of the snaps or so, because I want him to stay on the field. I want him to stay in this back-end RB1 role. It limits his ceiling. He can never be like a high-end RB1 as a result of this, but if it means he's going to stay on the field, it's definitely worthwhile for the Eagles as well as for DeAndre Swift's fantasy football value. So Saquon Barkley is the next guy here. He jumped right back into 82% of the snaps this week, playing on, 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks removed from a high ankle sprain. He was out there pretty much every single snap. The offense is bad. It's not really looking great right now, especially with Daniel Jones probably out for another game, maybe 2 games, maybe 3 games. But Saquon Barkley is a target and a volume monster, and once he gets back on track from a physical talent standpoint, I'm sure he's going to be putting up great production. So Raheem Mostert is an absolute monster, and he would probably be much higher on this list if we were just talking about, guys that we need for the next few weeks. But Raheem Mostert has been unbelievable. He has been so good. He's scoring the most touchdowns in the NFL right now. Devon Achane will be back in week 11, so that's kind of what dings Raheem Mostert down here to like the RB10 rest of season, as opposed to like probably RB4, where I'd have him ranked for the next couple weeks at the very least. Derrick Henry is definitely a tad slower this year. He's not looking like the same old Derrick Henry, but he is still getting a lot of work. He is still scoring touchdowns, and he could potentially be on the move from the Tennessee Titans, because now without Ryan Tannehill, they're starting to drop some games here and there. It's possible that they're going to want to get a look at Will Levis and some of their younger players, and that could mean, and we've already heard rumors for this, that Derrick Henry might be being shipped off to a contending NFL team, which I think would make a lot of sense, but I'm not really excited about buying into Derrick Henry on that possibility. What I would do is, if I had Derrick Henry, I would use that as a selling point, saying he might go to a better team, because right now it's looking pretty grim in Tennessee for Derrick Henry. So Josh Jacobs, closing out this year, hasn't quite been the same guy as he was last year, but he has gotten over 20 plus touches in every game except for one so far this season, and he has an 18% target share on the year. So he's been solid, but he definitely hasn't been as good as he was last year. Maybe use that luster of last year's season to maybe still sell high on Josh Jacobs, see if you can go up and get yourself DeAndre Swift, or maybe you can get yourself Saquon Barkley or Jonathan Taylor on the low right now. Then we get into the high-end RB2s tier. You guys can see the names there: Isaiah Pacheco, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, James Cook, David Montgomery, and Devon Achane. High-end RB2s, Pacheco is the top of this tier for me. He seems like a workhorse in Kansas City. He's realistically only getting about 60% of the snaps right now, but he has been consistent the last 3 games in that role, and he's averaging over 20 opportunities per game the past 3 weeks, and he has a cupcake schedule, and he plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, so you could maybe even make the argument that I have him too low here. You could make the argument that he belongs in the RB1s tier, but Isaiah Pacheco definitely been very solid for those of you guys that drafted him late. Aaron Jones should be healthy now, and Alvin Kamara is getting a great workload. I'll just kind of pair these two veterans together. But Jamal Williams is coming back soon. That makes me a little nervous for Alvin Kamara, which is why I have him a little bit lower, because they paid Jamal Williams a decent amount of money. It's not like, it's Alvin Kamara versus Kendre Miller, where you got a veteran player versus a young player. Kamara and Jamal Williams were in the same draft class. They're both veterans. I think once Jamal Williams is healthy, he's going to eat into Alvin Kamara's workload more than Kendre Miller is right now. And at the very least, this could become a 3-way timeshare, which would not be good for anybody involved. And then Aaron Jones, I'm still a little bit worried about his health at this current point in time, but he was practicing as of today, Wednesday, as I'm recording this. James Cook, I still believe in as a mid RB2. He has a solid workload. He's in an elite NFL offense. He's going to be a bit frustrating, so don't panic on James Cook. It's because this Buffalo Bills offense runs through Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen. It is not the James Cook show here, so he is going to disappear from time to time, but I would not be super nervous about James Cook. In fact, I'd probably be willing to buy low on him as like a low-end RB2, mid RB2 price tag. He's probably going right now for low-end RB2, high-end RB3 price tags on the open market. David Montgomery would be a lot higher if it wasn't for his injury. He'd be in the RB1s tier, if not, towards the middle or the high end of the RB1s tier. My guess is that he's going to be back from this shoulder injury after their week 9 bye. So we heard Dan Campbell come out and say, it's like week to week. We're playing it week by week. And I think David Montgomery is an integral piece of their offense, and they're going to be smart with him. They play a game here in week 7. They play a game here in week 8. And then they have a week 9 bye. It would probably make sense to hold David Montgomery out until week 10. And if that's the case, he has to take a ding in the rest of season rankings, of course. Same goes for Devon Achane. Obviously, he has been really good when he's been on the field, but he probably will not be back, or he definitely will not be back until week 11 after the Dolphins bye, because he was put on IR in week 6. Week 10 would put him at the end of that, and then their bye week is in Week 10, so he will not be back until Week 11, but he will be an RB1 if healthy. So if you guys are 6-0 or 5-1, definitely send out some offers for him. Then we get into the back-end RB2s, and I'll try and speed up these a little bit. All of these guys have some kind of issue. With Brian Robinson and Ramondre Stevenson, they seem kind of game script dependent. With Joe Mixon and Rashad White, they're kind of just meh talents, but they have like RB1 caliber workloads, so that's what keeps them kind of in this RB2 range. And then with Jahmyr Gibbs, he's kind of just all over the place, right? The coaching staff wants a committee. Jahmyr Gibbs himself isn't the best in like short yardage, and Montgomery, when he's back, is going to take away that work. And hell, even without Montgomery, maybe Craig Reynolds takes away that work. So not a great situation overall for Jahmyr Gibbs. Somebody that I'd probably be willing to sell on if people are buying into the fact that he's going to like scale production as the season goes along. To be honest, I just don't see that happening with the way this coaching staff has operated in years past with Swift and how they've operated so far with Jahmyr Gibbs. The 12th overall draft capital, it doesn't seem like something that they're going to hang their hat on right now until, Jahmyr Gibbs proves that he's capable of commanding more work. Then we get into flex plays, which is will close out the running back position here. Not going to go over these guys, really. You guys can see them on the screen there. Buy low on Javonte Williams and Roschon Johnson if you're in a winning position. So if you're 6-0, you're 4-1, or you're 4-2, or you're 5-1, and in need of some upside for your bench or for your flex positions, I think Javonte Williams and Roschon Johnson definitely make some sense. Then when it comes to like Dameon Pierce, Alexander Madison, Jerome Ford, these guys are kind of like drizzly right now. I don't really feel great about them. In theory, they're good workload guys, but as of right now, they're not really they haven't really been the greatest workload guys. And then Kyron Williams, who's at the end of this tier, it was kind of announced today that they have a bye in a couple weeks, and that's probably when he's going to be back. So he's going to be out for another couple weeks. And of course, Zach Evans was a big ticket waiver ad as a result of that. So let's move on to the wide receiver position, and we can kick it off right away with the elite wide receiver ones. Of course, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Jamar Chase, and now Cooper Kupp as well. All of these guys are elite talents. They're elite alpha target earners as well, and they're all incapable, if not really good, to elite offenses. So all of these guys are studs. They should take an arm and a leg to trade them away. I unfortunately had to trade away Stephon Diggs because I was dealing with a lot of injuries, and I bought on, Josh Jacobs and DK Metcalf and Christian Kirk, using Stephon Diggs as the big ticket item in that trade, but it should take a lot to pry these guys off of your team. And even though I got 3 starters out of that trade, I still feel unsettled about trading away a superstar like Stephon Diggs. Next, let's get into the solid wide receiver ones tier. Of course, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, and Brandon Ayuk, who is a new addition kind of to this area of the rankings. Amon-Ra St. Brown erupted this past week. He had a monster game, 29% target share on the year, and he's on an elite NFL offense. So he is a very clean projection, as is A.J. Brown. He has been crushing this season, 30% target share. Still some meat left on the bone for the Philadelphia Eagles offense. I think they could still get better, so that's encouraging for A.J. Brown as well. Devontae Adams is kind of teetering here. I could probably stand to even potentially move him down because he's been playing through some injuries in recent games. Still an elite alpha target earner and one of the best receivers in the league, but with this Jimmy Garoppolo injury, with the Devontae Adams banged up injury situation, maybe you argue he goes a little bit lower than this, but I still believe in him. And then finally, Brandon Ayuk, who is the newcomer of this tier, but man, oh man, has he been unbelievable this year. Season high this past week, 97% of the routes in week 6, 31% target share on the season, including 25% or better in every game that he's played so far this year. And this is with an average depth of target of 15 yards downfield. So the fact that he's commanding a 31% target share while getting all of these downfield targets is absolutely unbelievable. Like, that's like the type of, workload and the type of receiving volume that we see commanded from guys like Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase. So the fact that Ayuk is commanding that kind of workload is absolutely unbelievable. 33% target share on 3rd and 4th down as well. He is Brock Purdy's go-to guy. He is absolutely alphaing Deebo Samuel this year. And with Deebo and Christian McCaffrey now banged up, it could be even more coming for Brandon Ayuk. There is very few receivers that I would rather have than Brandon Ayuk rest of the season. I think you guys are seeing that play out in my rankings here. So the low-end wide receiver 1s, high-end wide receiver 2s, with Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, these guys are self-explanatory. The reason they're in this tier is because they're excellent number 2 wide receiver talents, probably could be number 1s on any other offense in the league. If anybody's worried about these guys, buy low on them because their offenses are going to bounce back. They're going to bounce back. I am not worried about these guys whatsoever. Puka Nacua has kind of worked his way up into this same exact conversation because the Rams offense, especially as a passing offense, has played really well. He has a 31% target share on the season as a rookie, who tend to get better as the season goes along. 28% target share in the last 2 games with Cooper Kupp on the field, commanding 42% of the targets in his own right. So Puka Nacua, I mean, he was a drop touchdown away from having another great game. So I'm not worried about him whatsoever. If anybody is moderately concerned about him, I doubt they are, but if they are, definitely go out and buy him for top 15 wide receiver price tags. And then Chris Olave and Calvin Ridley, both of these guys are on the low right now. Both of them I believe in as target earning alphas, and their offensive production should be a little bit more consistent rest of the season. I think the Saints and the Jacksonville Jaguars should be able to bounce back a little bit, and I believe both of these guys are excellent buy lows right now if you're looking for some wide receiver talent. Next, let's get into the wide receiver 2s here. So DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman Jr., Christian Watson, and Justin Jefferson, who, of course, is on the mend with a hamstring injury. Metcalf and Higgins are pretty similar, so I can kind of group these guys together. Both the Seahawks and the Bengals offenses, who ironically just played each other, just need to play better, right? The schedule eases up a little bit for them, and they should be able to bounce back. Metcalf and Higgins are a little volatile because if their offenses don't bounce back, then they could definitely find themselves into like wide receiver 3 territory. But I do think both offenses will bounce back, so that's why I'm a little higher on Metcalf and Higgins. Mike Evans has had a few down weeks in a row and also a bye week, but he should bounce back. This is kind of just who he is. This is the nature of the Mike Evans experience, and Baker also is a little inconsistent, so he's probably not going to look the greatest week over week. But Mike Evans is a guy that I think should be just fine going forward. Michael Pittman Jr. has 4 games this season out of 6 with 9 targets or more. So he is getting absolutely fed this year. Despite the shaky offense with Gardner Minshew at the helm, I still believe in Michael Pittman to be a target commanding alpha wide receiver. Christian Watson is a bit of a projection here because he hasn't quite produced to this level yet, but I have been very impressed from what I've seen. He has a bye week now to get 100%. He had a 25% target share before the bye week, which is his first full game back and healthy. I think that Jordan Love coming off the bye and now having all these guys on the field ready to go, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Jaden Reed, it's going to make the offense better. Aaron Jones is now healthy, which is going to make the offense better as well. So I believe quite a bit in this Packers offense, especially in Christian Watson down the stretch, and I think he's a great buy low at this point in time as well. And then Justin Jefferson closes out this tier. It's really difficult to know where to rank this guy because if you're 6-0 or if you're 5-1, I could make the argument he's still a top 15 receiver rest of the season. But at the same time, it's really tough to gauge without a team to work off of, as well as the risk that maybe Justin Jefferson gets shut down because the Minnesota Vikings are not really winning games right now. Maybe they phone it in on their season. It doesn't sound like Kirk Cousins is going to get traded, but it's possible that they don't really want to risk Justin Jefferson dealing with a major injury, especially knowing that Jefferson himself is up for a big contract extension, and I'm sure he wants to get paid and be the highest paid NFL wide receiver in the history of the game this offseason. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm not overly buying on Justin Jefferson if you're a contender, but I will say he is a decent buy if people are going to sell him for nothing. So low-end wide receiver 2s and high-end wide receiver 3s. There's a couple alpha target earners here. Amari Cooper, Adam Thielen, and Nico Collins. These guys have all been number 1s. A couple dynamic players here that aren't quite getting the targets with Debo and Jordan Addison. And then Jacoby Myers is the only one in this tier that kind of doesn't really fit either description. He's just been really solid across from Devontae Adams, and he definitely gets hurt by the Jimmy Garoppolo injury. Again, from this tier all the way down to the flex plays, there's not a massive difference between these guys. I will say it is much bigger of a tier break between these guys and the tier ahead of them than it is even down to the second tier of this video. So the wide receiver 3s tier, we have Christian Kirk, Drake London, Zay Flowers, and Hollywood Brown. I think all of these guys are ceiling buys. If you guys are looking for a higher ceiling flex option, I think all of them have a path to get better as the season goes along. For Christian Kirk and for Zay Flowers, if their offenses get more consistent, they'll be better. Drake London has, kind of taken another step this year, and if Desmond Ridder can be more consistent, he'll be better. And then Hollywood Brown could be getting Kyler Murray back soon. As of today, like a few minutes before I started recording, he is back practicing, so it's possible in a week or two he's back starting for the Arizona Cardinals, and that would be massive for Hollywood Brown. So keep that in mind with Marquise Brown. He has a chance to really become a better option as the season goes along. And then with DJ Moore and George Pickens, who also round out this tier, they would have been higher up, probably even into the next tier ahead of them, if it weren't for the Justin Fields injury, which it looks like is going to keep him out for a number of weeks, as well as Deontay Johnson coming back from IR for George Pickens. So hopefully you sold high on both of these guys. guys, I think they're both pretty solid still, but they're going to be more volatile going forward because of the two factors that I just outlined. And then finally, closing out the wide receiver position, we have the flex plays. So a lot of these guys are kind of just like mid offenses, meh target shares, or whatever the case is. They're just solid depth pieces. They're not outstanding options week over week. Either way, if any of these guys pop off for, a game or two in a row in the next few weeks, maybe use them plus a piece to tier up to a better option at wide receiver, to a better option at running back. Realistically, some of these guys are comparable to low-end wide receiver 2s and high-end wide receiver 3 tiers, as I mentioned, though. Not a ton separating wide receivers like 25 all the way to wide receiver 40, closing out this flex plays tier. So I'm going to go rapid fire on the quarterback and the tight end position because I'm sure a lot of you guys just wanted to hear about the flex players anyway, the running backs and the wide receivers. But this is my rest of season quarterback rankings. As I see it, Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts right now are the only elite quarterback ones. Patrick Mahomes quite hasn't played to that level, but he is in the same kind of every week quarterback one starter as Justin Herbert, as Lamar Jackson, and what Tua Tagovailoa has accomplished so far this year cannot be understated as well. Then we get into the low-end quarterback ones, Burrow, Purdy, Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff, and Kirk Cousins. Again, varying results here, I think, with Brock Purdy and with Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff. These guys have been pretty good so far this year, especially Jared Goff has been a big surprise. With Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, I'm kind of projecting that they'll get better as the season goes along, and I would say they have the ability to jump into the every week quarterback ones tier as well, and maybe unseat some of those guys, so keep that in mind with them. If you're looking for a quarterback buy low, I think Burrow and Lawrence make a lot of sense. And then when it comes to streamers, again, Fields would be in the low-end quarterback one tier if he wasn't injured, but he's definitely a viable streamer once he gets back. CJ Stroud, Sam Howell, Kyler Murray, who I just talked about, is practicing today. Make sure he is rostered in your league if you're in need of a quarterback, pickup or whatever. You can use like a Matthew Stafford or a Brock Purdy for the next couple of weeks. Stash Kyler Murray at the end of your bench. He could be a good option. And then with Dak Prescott, we saw some signs of life on Monday night, but I'm not overly excited about Dak Prescott rest of the season because the Cowboys seem very intent on running the ball. And then I have this last tier labeled as just sure, I guess, if you guys want to start these guys or if you're a big fan of them. Jordan Love, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Matthew Stafford, and Geno Smith close out my top 20 quarterbacks rest of the season. Although I will say, if you are starting Jordan Love, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Stafford, or Smith, or hell, even some of these other guys, Stroud, Howell, Dak Prescott, or whatever, you lost Justin Fields, you lost Anthony Richardson, you probably want to go buy low on Joe Burrow, on Trevor Lawrence, potentially on Lamar Jackson, or some of these other guys. If you guys can get up to those players, that would make a lot of sense. And then closing out this video, let's get into the top 20 or top 15 or so tight ends for my rest of season rankings. The elite tight end ones, again, realistically, Travis Kelce's probably in his own tier, but just for visual sake, I'm going to put him in this tier with TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, and Sam Laporta. All of these guys kind of have their pros and cons. With TJ Hawkinson, given that the Justin Jefferson injury could linger to the end of the season or just could linger enough to the point that Hawkinson really starts to produce here, I think he is my preference over Andrews and Sam Laporta because I think the targets will be very high. I think he can be an 8, 9, 10 target a game type of tight end, which is pretty rare, and only a guy like Travis Kelce sees that kind of volume. Then with Mark Andrews and Sam Laporta, you're getting two guys that are going to be efficient, two guys that can score touchdowns. Sam Laporta's in a slightly better offense, but Mark Andrews has a proven track record. So again, pros and cons with either of those guys. Then when it comes to every week starters, and a lot of you guys probably have these players and don't think of them as every week starters, but I promise you, George Kittle, Evan Ingram, Dallas Goedert, Kyle Pitts, and Darren Waller are every week starters at tight end. If you think it's bad starting these guys every week, there's a lot of guys in your league that would kill to have a guy like this who they know they can put into their lineup. Yeah, George Kittle is inconsistent. He had a point last week after having like 35 2 weeks ago. That's just who George Kittle is. You got to live with the downs to get the ups, and that's why you have to put him into your lineup every week. Evan Ingram has been a little bit more consistent. He's been a consistent target share guy, but he's probably not going to have like a monster stretch of having like elite production. With Dallas Goedert, with Kyle Pitts, and with Darren Waller, again, you got to live with the downs to get the ups. They're probably not going to have every week consistent week over week target shares and production, but they're going to give you some spike weeks. Kyle Pitts, I would say, has been the most consistent of this group, and Dallas Goedert has been the biggest spike week potential of this group as well. Then if you guys are really screwed at tight end and you're looking for some upside options, Michael Mayer was one of my favorite waiver ads this week. He heads out this tier for me, as does Luke Musgrave, who's another young rookie tight end. Same with Pat Freiermuth, who's another young tight end coming off of an injury. And then Dalton Schultz has been pretty productive in the last couple games, so keep an eye on him. If you need a, startable tight end right now and Dalton Schultz is available, I think he's a great waiver pickup to pair with a guy like Michael Mayer for a little bit more upside. And then again, the sure, I guess tier, if you are starting these tight ends, you probably need a better option. David Njoku, Cole Kmet, Logan Thomas, Dalton Kincaid, Gerald Everett, anybody that's not listed here, you definitely need a better option. I would say try and go buy low on some of the guys ahead of them, like a Kyle Pitts if they're frustrated, like an Evan Ingram if they're frustrated, a Dallas Goedert, a Darren Waller if they're frustrated. Again, tight end landscape is always bad. We always say it's going to be good, and it never is. There's only really 4 really good tight ends in fantasy: Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, and Sam Laporta. Those are the guys. If you don't have them, you got to live with the ups and downs of George Kittle. You got to live with the ups and downs of Kyle Pitts. You got to live with the ups and downs of Dallas Goedert, and maybe make some trades if you guys can to get yourself a Mark Andrews, to get yourself a TJ Hawkinson on the low. But that is the end of the video. Again, if you got some value from this, if I gave you guys some good, tangible analysis to go out and send some trade offers, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here as well. Leave any of your comments down below as well. I'm happy to engage with you and kind of talk back and forth of why I have players ranked certain ways or whatever trade offers you might have on the table. I will try and answer as many comments as I possibly can. And of course, if you want our rest of season rankings, if you want our weekly rankings, including all of our matchup charts and everything that you can use to make the proper informed start-sit decisions, as well as our dynasty rankings and all that other good stuff, head on over to flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off when you sign up. Sign up annually to get free 6 months, as well as a Zoom consultation with myself or with Danny. So if that interests you, check that out. Link down below in the pinned comment. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.